The iron door of Belridge State Prison groaned open with the same harsh screech Ethan Cole had heard for 20 years. But this time, that sound meant something else. It meant freedom. He stood motionless for a moment on the threshold, staring out at the morning light like it might burn him. The air was cool, crisp, April in upstate New York. But to Ethan, it smelled like possibility, like the first sip of aged whiskey after decades of rot gut. He ran his fingers through the coarse hedgehog of gray hair that had grown in the place of jet-black youth. His skin was paler now, thin, almost fragile. The years hadn't been kind, but they hadn't broken him. He wore a plain white t-shirt and stiff blue jeans, the kind the prison gave everyone on their way out, as if freedom came in uniform. In his hand, a tattered duffel bag sagged with the weight of his past, a couple of letters, a cracked photo frame, a prison-made leather wallet, and one driver's license, issued to a man who no longer existed. Ethan Cole, age 29, smiling like he had the world at his feet. The guard who escorted him gave a polite, almost embarrassed cough. "Good luck out there, Cole. Try not to come back." Ethan gave him a small nod. No words. What was there to say? He had no intention of returning. He had plans. He walked slowly down the long access road that led to the bus stop. Gravel crunched beneath his boots. Trees were blooming along the edges, unaware of the man walking into a world that had moved on without him. For a moment, he let himself breathe. Then the memories flooded in. 20 years earlier, on a quiet Tuesday evening, he'd come home early to surprise his wife, Rebecca, with a bottle of red wine. It was their 5th wedding anniversary. He remembered the smell of the rain on the pavement, the way the streetlights glistened in the reflection of water. Rebecca hadn't answered her phone that day. He thought maybe she was planning a surprise of her own. He set the table, lit 2 candles. At 2:04 a.m., the doorbell rang. He remembered walking to the door, smiling. But it wasn't Rebecca. It was 2 police officers. "Ethan Cole?" "Yes?" "You're under arrest for the rape of Rebecca Lane." The words didn't make sense at first, like static, like a language he didn't speak. But they said it again, this time slower. He saw the cuffs, felt the cold bite of steel on his wrists. Everything after that was a blur. The bruises on her body, the testimony, the photos of their bedroom. Rebecca had told the court that he'd been abusing her for months, that she had finally tried to leave, that he'd caught her and raped her. He had no way to prove otherwise. No alibi. No witnesses. She had tears in her eyes when she told the jury. He remembered staring at her, searching for the woman he knew. She never looked back. 20 years? That's what it cost him. The bus hissed to a stop, jolting him back to the present. Ethan climbed aboard and handed the driver a crumpled bill. He sat by the window and stared out as the prison vanished behind the hills. In his heart, a storm was building. Not of rage, no, something colder than that. Resolve. 40 minutes later, he stepped out in front of a worn-down motel in Riverbend, a town just far enough from the prison to feel like the edge of the world. The place smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. He gave his name at the desk, room 27. Calvin Ward was waiting for him. The 2 men embraced briefly. There were no words. They didn't need them. Calvin looked older, but sharper than Ethan remembered. His clothes were new, his face clean-shaven, his eyes alert. He'd been out a month already. And unlike most men who left prison, Calvin had a plan. "Freedom looks good on you," Ethan said with a faint smile. Calvin shrugged. Doesn't come easy, but I knew what I had to do. I've got a job now, bookstore downtown. Owner's one of those second chance types. I've got a place too. Tiny, but it's mine. He paused. And I know where she is. Ethan didn't ask who. He didn't have to. Rebecca, Calvin continued. Her name's Rebecca Sterling now. Married some hotshot architect. Brock. Real money, real status, lives in Lake Haven. Big house, big life. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had expected her to move on, but somehow hearing it out loud felt like another blow to the chest. She's running a non-profit, Calvin added, a foundation for survivors of domestic violence. The silence between them grew heavy. She built a life on the ruins of yours, Calvin said quietly. Ethan didn't reply. He didn't have to. Ethan stayed in Calvin's modest apartment for the next few days. It was a far cry from the steel and cement of prison. A beat-up leather couch, chipped coffee mugs, a radio that only played oldies. But to Ethan, it was a palace. The first hot shower without a guard watching. The first meal he could eat when he wanted. The first night he slept without hearing someone scream down the corridor. Freedom wasn't just about walking outside. It was the little things, the ordinary things, the things prison tried to erase. But Ethan hadn't come out to rebuild his life. He had come out to understand why it had been stolen. Calvin handed him a printout one morning. It was a dossier, crude but effective, on Rebecca Sterling's new life. Pictures of her from charity galas, smiling in expensive dresses. Articles quoting her on domestic violence reform. Even a podcast interview. She's everywhere, Ethan muttered, scanning her face, like some kind of martyr. Calvin lit a cigarette and leaned against the counter. She's been building this story for 20 years. She became a saint because you were the devil. Ethan stared at her image for a long time. Her face hadn't changed much. A few lines, a touch of age around the eyes, but still sharp, elegant, powerful, untouchable. I need to see her, Ethan said. Calvin raised an eyebrow. That's risky. I won't talk to her. I just want to see how she lives, how she walks through the world without guilt. 2 days later, Ethan borrowed Calvin's old gray Ford, the kind of car no one looked at twice, and drove to Lake Haven. It was a pristine suburb with white picket fences and security cameras on every corner. He parked 2 blocks from the house, walked to the park across the street, and sat on a bench beneath a sycamore tree. The Sterling home sat atop a low hill, surrounded by manicured hedges and glass-paneled windows. It looked like a catalog picture, perfect, sterile, soulless. At 9 o'clock a.m., sharp, a silver BMW pulled out of the driveway. Brock Sterling, tall, young, smug, waved at the gate camera before driving off. Ethan watched through compact binoculars. The man looked like someone who'd never had to fight for anything in his life. At noon, the gates opened again. A white Lexus slid down the driveway. She was behind the wheel. Rebecca, even from a distance, Ethan recognized the way she held herself. Proud, poised, polished. She wore sunglasses and a tailored coat, her hair swept up like she was heading to a photo shoot, not a board meeting. Ethan gritted his teeth. She looked happy. He followed her, at a distance, through the winding streets of downtown. She parked in front of a sleek glass building with bold letters across the front, the Catherine Moore Foundation for Women's Advocacy. Of course, she had named it after her old friend Catherine, the same woman whose testimony had sealed Ethan's fate, the same woman who had died under unusual circumstances 15 years ago. He didn't go inside. He just took note of the address. That night, back at Calvin's, Ethan said nothing. He just poured a glass of whiskey and sat in silence. Calvin didn't push. The next evening, Ethan returned to Lake Haven. This time, from a hill behind the Sterling house, he watched through the panoramic living room windows. Rebecca and Brock were hosting a dinner party. Wine, laughter, expensive clothes, jazz music floating into the night. Ethan stared at her, the way she laughed, the way she touched her husband's arm, the way she smiled like she had never done anything wrong. He hadn't realized his hands had curled into fists. His nails dug into his palms. 20 years these. 20 years of steel bars, cold food, humiliation. And she was here, sipping wine, making toasts, living in a glass castle built on lies. She doesn't even flinch, he told Calvin later. She acts like it never happened, like I never existed. Calvin exhaled smoke through his nose. That's because she buried you. In her mind, you're already dead. Ethan said nothing. But in his chest, something dark and heavy settled. He began watching their routines. Brock left for work at 9, returned at 7. Rebecca worked from the foundation 3 times a week, went to the spa on Tuesdays, met friends at a trendy bistro on Thursdays. Every moment of her life seemed choreographed, curated, perfect. One afternoon, while Ethan sat on the same bench across from the house, Rebecca suddenly turned and looked in his direction. His pulse spiked. He pulled his cap lower over his eyes. She stared for a moment, then turned away. She hadn't recognized him, probably couldn't. But for the first time, Ethan wondered if maybe she felt something, a presence, a shadow, a ghost from a past she thought had been buried. That night, she said something to Brock over dinner. There's a man, she said, in the park. He's been there a few times, just sitting. Brock looked up from his laptop. What kind of man? I don't know. Hat? Dark jacket? He never looks up. Probably just a jogger resting. Or some retiree. Maybe. She tried to smile. I get this strange feeling, like he's watching. Brock laughed and pulled her in for a hug. You work too hard. You're tired. We'll take a weekend off, okay? She nodded. But the unease didn't leave her, especially when, the next morning, she found a plain envelope on her car windshield. Inside, a single slip of paper. The truth always comes out. Her hands trembled as she folded it back. The following days passed in a haze of routine and obsession. Ethan kept watching the house, always from a distance, always cautious. The paranoia had settled into his bones. Not fear of being caught, but fear of losing sight of her again. The way she walked, the rhythm of her days, the car she drove. He memorized it all. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about understanding. She had taken everything, his youth, his name, his dignity, and then risen like a phoenix built on lies. Now, he wanted to know who she'd become. But he wasn't the only one watching. Rebecca had started to feel it too. A pressure at the back of her neck, a flicker in her peripheral vision. She started changing her routine, took different roads to work, glanced over her shoulder in parking garages, checked the mirrors twice when backing out of her driveway. And then the letter came. She hadn't told Brock. He was stressed already, planning a charity gala for the foundation's anniversary. He wouldn't understand. Or worse, he would dismiss her concerns entirely. But Rebecca knew. She could feel the past crawling up her spine. That Friday night, she hosted a small dinner at the house. A few close friends, business associates, wine and laughter, flowing like nothing had ever happened. Ethan watched from the shadows beyond the hedge, his body rigid with silent fury. He saw the way she touched Brock's hand, the way she laughed at stories, the way she looked like she'd won. She's happy, he muttered to himself. She's still happy. Later that night, Calvin found Ethan pacing in the living room, fists clenched. "Talk to me," Calvin said carefully. Ethan turned. His voice was tight. "She doesn't deserve that life. She doesn't deserve any of it." Calvin nodded, slow and deliberate. "You thinking about confronting her?" "I'm thinking." Ethan exhaled sharply. "I'm thinking I need answers." "Then we need a plan," Calvin said. "One that doesn't end with both of us back inside." The next morning, Calvin suggested something bold. "What if we get her to talk? Really talk? Confess?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She's not going to just admit it. People talk when they're scared, or when they're cornered. We break in, set up a recorder, get her on tape. A confession. That's all we need. We don't touch her. We don't hurt anyone. Just the truth." Ethan hesitated. He wanted that, more than anything, to hear it, to see the lie collapse under its own weight. "All right," he said finally. "Let's do it." But they never got that far. On Monday morning, the quiet streets of Lake Haven shattered with sirens. The Sterling residence was swarmed with police cruisers, yellow tape, news vans circling like vultures. A neighbor had heard the screaming. The maid had called 911. Inside, the picture was clear and horrifying. Rebecca Sterling lay on her bed, her throat slit clean, eyes frozen wide with fear. Brock lay on the carpet nearby, his skull cracked open from a blow to the head. Detective Samuel Brecker arrived 40 minutes later, his gray temples sharp against his black suit, a coffee in one hand and a growing sense of dread in the other. With 15 years in homicide and over 100 cases solved, Brecker had learned to read a crime scene like a language. And this one screamed something personal. No signs of forced entry, no valuables missing, nothing stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was a reckoning. The forensic team moved carefully through the house. Brecker examined the bedroom, the wine glasses, the dinner plates, the shattered vase on the floor. Rebecca's body still lay on the bed, blood soaked into the sheets. Her wrists bruised as if someone had pinned her down. Brock had fought back. His knuckles were torn, blood under his fingernails, but it hadn't been enough. "What do we know about them?" Brecker asked his junior, Detective Lisa Monroe. Rebecca Lane Sterling, 47, founder of the Catherine Moore Foundation. Brock Sterling, 33, architect at Whitestone Design Group. Married 12 years. Public image? Impeccable. Brecker narrowed his eyes. "No one's that perfect." Lisa hesitated. "One detail, sir. Rebecca's first husband, Ethan Cole, served 20 years for rape. Of her." Brecker's head snapped around. "When was he released?" 2 weeks ago." "Jesus." He stared out the window, the wheels turning. "Find him," he said. "Now." Within hours, a bolo was issued. Ethan Cole's name and face were back in the system, and somewhere, in a cheap motel 2 towns over, Ethan saw his mugshot on the news. Detective Samuel Brecker didn't sleep that night. Not out of anxiety. He had long since grown numb to blood and tragedy, but because something in this case didn't sit right. He sat in his office past midnight, files strewn across his desk, photos of the crime scene overlapping old court records like 2 timelines collapsing into each other. Ethan Cole, 20 years ago, he was convicted of raping his wife, Rebecca Lane, now Rebecca Sterling. The evidence was mostly circumstantial. Her testimony, some bruises, no witnesses. Cole had no alibi. He claimed innocence, He was sentenced to the full 20 years. And now, 1 week after his release, she and her husband were dead. It was too perfect, too expected. Brecker had learned something over the years. The truth was rarely neat. He called his contact at the DA's office and requested the full case file from Cole's original trial. The thick manila folder arrived an hour later. Brecker dove in. There it was again. Rebecca's testimony. Detailed. Emotional. She had said Ethan had become controlling, paranoid, that he hit her, threatened her, that she tried to leave, and that was the night he raped her. The medical report confirmed bruises and signs of assault, but something about it struck Brecker as staged, too consistent. The injuries were evenly distributed, no chaotic signs of struggle, almost like they'd been inflicted deliberately. He scribbled a note. Injuries look patterned, not organic. One witness stood out in the trial transcripts. Catherine Moore, Rebecca's friend, former co-worker. She had testified that Rebecca had confided in her for months about the abuse. Brecker checked the record. Catherine Moore had died 15 years ago. A drowning, ruled accidental. Still, something itched. He ran a cross-reference search through archived interviews. Several former neighbors of Ethan and Rebecca had told reporters at the time that they never saw signs of violence. One even said they seemed like a happy, boring couple. So why would she lie? And then, a discovery. Another name, Calvin Ward. Brecker blinked. 27 years ago, Ward had been convicted of sexual assault. The key witness? Rebecca Lane. She had testified that she'd seen him attack a young woman behind a university library. The victim never testified. Too traumatized, the court was told. Ward got 25 years. He and Cole served time in the same prison. They were released a month apart, and now both were missing. The hairs on the back of Brecker's neck stood up. He picked up the phone. Get me everything we have on Calvin Ward, including known addresses, last employers, and cell tower pings. 2 hours later, a new photo popped up on Brecker's monitor. Surveillance footage of a gray Ford, registered to Ward, parked outside the Sterling residence 3 days in a row. In the passenger seat, a man resembling Ethan Cole, wearing a cap, face partially obscured. They were watching her, Brecker muttered. They had a plan. He needed to find them fast, but they had already vanished. Miles away, in a motel off a forgotten highway, Ethan was staring at the TV in disbelief. His face was on the news. Ethan Cole, released from prison last week, is now wanted for questioning in connection with the double homicide of Rebecca and Brock Sterling. Calvin stood near the sink, expression unreadable. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Well, he said. Calvin stood near the sink, expression unreadable. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Well, he said. That didn't take long. Ethan didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the screen as images of the Sterling crime scene flickered by. Yellow tape. Stretchers. Reporters. Chaos. I didn't kill them, Ethan said quietly. I never even stepped inside that house. I know, Calvin replied, but the cops won't believe that. You have motive, history, no alibi. They'll hang this on you without hesitation. Ethan turned to him slowly. Where were you that night? Calvin hesitated. I went out. Needed air. Just walked. Got back late. There was something off in his voice. Distant. Careful. Ethan didn't press. Not yet. The next morning, Calvin was up early. He packed their things, insisted they leave immediately. They'll find us if we stay. We need to move. Now. They drove for hours. First to Oak Ridge, then south toward the smaller town of Spring Hollow. Cheap motels, prepaid cell phones, cash-only diners. Calvin kept the radio off and talked less and less. And Ethan began to feel it, the weight of a question he didn't want to ask. Did Calvin do it? They had planned to confront Rebecca, not to harm her. Just a recording, a confession, closure. But what if Calvin had gone further? What if he had broken? He tried to push the thought away, but it lingered like smoke. Meanwhile, back at River County PD, Detective Brecker had begun to reconstruct the real puzzle. He pulled in all files related to Rebecca Lane, not just Cole's conviction, but also the Ward case from 27 years ago. He was chasing a pattern now, a thread that tied two ruined lives together. He spoke with Elizabeth Foster, the original victim in the Calvin Ward case. Now, in her 50s, a school teacher in Portland. On the phone, her voice trembled. "I never wanted to testify," she admitted. "Rebecca, she talked me into it, said we needed to punish him, that he had hurt her too. I never saw the attack. I was scared. I was stupid." Brecker listened, jaw tight. She said it was just to teach him a lesson. Said it would be community service, not 25 years. Brecker thanked her, then stared at the board in his office. Two men, two false accusations, one woman at the center of both. And now that woman was dead. He suspected Calvin had killed her. But was Ethan just collateral damage or a willing partner? A knock on the door broke his thoughts. His partner, Lisa, entered with a flash drive and a note. "Anonymous drop-off," she said. "Found it at the front desk." Brecker inserted the drive. A video opened. Calvin Ward sat at a table, expression solemn. "If you're watching this, then I'm either on the run or already gone." He began to speak, slowly, clearly. "I killed Rebecca Sterling and her husband, Brock. Ethan Cole didn't know. He wasn't involved. He wanted her to confess, but he never wanted blood." Brecker leaned forward. "She ruined my life. Sent me to prison for something I didn't do. 27 years I sat with that. Then I met Ethan, and when I saw her face in the photo he showed me, I realized she'd done it to him too. That woman didn't just lie. She built a life on it, built a foundation, became a hero." The video shook slightly. Calvin's voice cracked. "I didn't go there to kill her. I just wanted her to admit it. But she screamed. Her husband rushed me. There was a struggle. I didn't mean to kill him, but I did. And once that happened," a pause. "I couldn't leave her alive." Silence. Then, "Ethan deserves peace. He deserves to be free." The screen went black. Brecker closed the laptop. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and barked to the room. "Find Ethan Cole. Now. Bring him in. But not like a suspect. Like a survivor." The call came at 3:42 a.m. "Detective Brecker." The officer's voice crackled through the line. "We found him." Brecker was already half-dressed. Within 15 minutes, he and a small team arrived at a run-down roadside motel near the edge of Spring Hollow. Room 11. The desk clerk had recognized Ethan Cole from the news and called it in. The door was unlocked. Inside, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, hands open on his knees, as if surrendering not just to the law, but to the weight of 20 years. Brecker stepped in slowly, nodded at the officers to wait outside. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly, "I'm Detective Samuel Brecker." Ethan looked up. His face was tired, unshaven, but there was a clarity in his eyes, the kind that comes only after a man has lost everything and stopped trying to pretend otherwise. "I didn't kill her," he said. "I know," Brecker replied. There was a pause. It lingered like fog. "Calvin?" Ethan asked. Brecker nodded. "He confessed. We have the video. You're not being charged with murder, but you will need to answer for fleeing, for not coming in sooner. I was afraid, Ethan whispered. I thought no one would believe me again. I don't blame you. A beat passed between them. I spent 2 decades wondering why she did it, Ethan said. Why lie? Why destroy me like that? Brecker sat down in the chair opposite him. I've been trying to answer that myself. They talked for hours about Rebecca, about Calvin, about justice, and how slippery it could be. By noon, Ethan was processed and released under supervised probation, pending a formal review of his 20-year-old conviction. The new evidence, the video, the retracted witness statements, the inconsistencies in the medical report, all pointed to a disturbing conclusion. Ethan Cole had been innocent all along. A month later, a special court convened. Elizabeth Foster took the stand and tearfully admitted that she had lied under pressure from Rebecca Lane. She had wanted to fix it for years, but was afraid of perjury charges. Now, she was ready to accept whatever consequences came with telling the truth. Medical experts reviewed the original evidence and confirmed what Brecker had suspected. The injuries had been inflicted with controlled pressure. Staged. Former neighbors testified. Ethan's behavior during his marriage was described as gentle, quiet, loving. No history of abuse. It took only 1 day for the judge to formally vacate Ethan's conviction. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. Again, but this time truly free. Months passed. Brecker met Ethan one morning at a diner near the city park. The air smelled like coffee and fresh bread. Ethan looked different. Hair trimmed, new jacket, eyes calmer. I got a job, Ethan said with a faint smile. Construction, pays decent. The crew's good. No one asked too many questions. And the nights? Brecker asked. They're better, Ethan said. Still wake up sometimes, but better. Brecker nodded. I've been thinking, Ethan continued, about what Calvin did, about what I almost did. You know, if he hadn't acted first, maybe it would have been me. Brecker said nothing. But I'm glad it wasn't, Ethan added. I don't want to be a man shaped by revenge. You're not, Brecker said. Ethan looked out the window. Justice is funny, isn't it? Some people spend their lives chasing it. Some run from it. And sometimes it comes too late. Brecker sipped his coffee. But it came, he said. Ethan smiled. Just a little. Yeah, it did. They parted ways a few minutes later. Brecker watched him walk down the street, hands in his pockets, shoulders straighter than before. Later that week, a final report was filed. Case closed. No further suspects. No charges. Just the memory of what happens when one lie goes too far, and how many lives it can fracture. In his office, Brecker added Ethan Cole's file to a locked cabinet, not under open cases, but under redemption. And outside, life moved on, but somewhere, someone else was waiting for their justice. And Brecker would be there when they called. Truth may sleep, but it never dies. In a world where appearances often override substance, and where lies, if repeated enough, can become someone's legacy, the Silent Witness Files reminds us of one thing. The truth is patient. Justice doesn't always come wrapped in a courtroom verdict. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes it arrives broken, bloodied, and too late to heal all the wounds. But when it does come, it changes everything. Not because it erases the past, but because it reclaims the dignity that was lost. This story isn't just about Ethan Cole's false imprisonment. It's about how dangerous silence can be. How one person's need for power, validation, or revenge can ripple out and destroy multiple lives. And how, Even in the darkest chapters of betrayal, someone like Ethan can still choose integrity over vengeance. In a time when misinformation spreads fast and judgment is passed even faster, we are reminded that every person has a deeper story, that being falsely accused, being broken, being invisible, does not mean being defeated. The truth may sleep, but it never dies. So wherever you are in life, whether you're seeking redemption, struggling to be heard, or simply holding on to your version of the truth, remember this: truth doesn't need applause, it just needs time and courage. Because sometimes surviving is the most radical act of justice there is.